All right, hi guys. Welcome back. I'm going to read for you today Crime and Punishment. Okay. Please make sure that you are taking one page of notes and then be ready to write a one-hand summary at the end as we usually do. Let me begin. Part 1. At the beginning of July, during an extremely hot spell, towards evening, a young man left the closet he rented from tenants in S Lane, walked out to the street, and slowly, as if indecisively, headed for the K Bridge. He had safely avoided meeting his landlady on the stairs. His closet was located just under the roof of a tall, 5-storied house, and was more like a cupboard than a room. As for the landlady, from whom he rented this closet with dinner and maid service included, she lived one flight below in separate rooms, and every time he went out, he could not fail to pass by the landlady's kitchen, the door of which almost always stood wide open to the stairs. And each time he passed by, the young man felt some painful and cowardly sensation which made him wince with shame. He was over his head in debt to the landlady and was afraid of meeting her. It was not that he was so cowardly and downtrodden, even quite the contrary. But for some time he had been in an irritable and tense state, resembling hypochondria. He was so immersed in himself and had isolated himself so much from everyone that he was afraid not only of meeting his landlady, but of meeting anyone at all. He was crushed by poverty, but even his strained circumstances had lately ceased to burden him. He had entirely given up on attending to his daily affairs and did not want to attend to them. As a matter of fact, he was not afraid of any landlady, whatever she might be plotting against him. But to stop on the stairs to listen to all sorts of nonsense about this commonplace rubbish, which he could not care less about, all this badgering for payment, these threats and complaints, and to have to dodge all the while, make excuses, lie. Oh no, better to steal cat-like down the stairs somehow and slip away unseen by anyone. This time, however, as he walked out to the street, even he was struck by his fear of meeting his creditor. I want to attempt such a thing, and at the same time, I'm afraid of such trifles, he thought with a strange smile. Yes, man has it all in his hands, and it all slips through his fingers from sheer cowardice. I wonder, what are people most afraid of? A new step, their own new word. That's what they're most afraid of. I babble too much, however. That's why I don't do anything, because I babble. However, maybe it's like this. I babble because I don't do anything. I've learned to babble over this past month, lying in a corner day in and day out, thinking about Cuckoo Land. Why on earth am I going now? Am I really capable of that? Is that something serious? No, not serious at all. I'm just toying with it for the sake of fantasy. A plaything. Yes, a plaything if you like. It was terribly hot out, and moreover, it was close, crowded. Lime, scaffolding, bricks, dust everywhere, and that special summer stench known so well to every Petersburger who cannot afford to rent a summer house. All at once these things unpleasantly shook the young man's already overwrought nerves. the intolerable stench from the taverns, especially numerous in that part of the city, and the drunkards he kept running into, even though it was a weekday, completed the loathsome and melancholy coloring of the picture. A feeling of the deepest revulsion flashed for a moment in the young man's fine features. Incidentally, he was remarkably good-looking, taller than average, slender and trim, with beautiful dark eyes and dark blonde hair. But soon he lapsed as if into deep thought, or even more precisely, into some sort of oblivion, and walked on no longer, noticing what was around him and not wishing to notice. He only muttered something to himself from time to time, out of that habit of monologues he had just confessed to himself. At that same moment, he was aware that his thoughts sometimes became muddled, and that he was very weak. It was the second day that he had had almost nothing to eat. He was so badly depressed that another man, even an accustomed one, would have been ashamed to go out in such rags during the daytime. However, the neighborhood was such that it was hard to cause any surprise with one's dress. The proximity of the Haymarket, the abundance of certain establishments, a population predominantly of craftsmen and artisans who clustered in these central Petersburg streets and lanes, sometimes produced such a motley of types in the general panorama that had to be surprised at meeting any sort of figure would even have been strange. But so much spiteful contempt was already stored up in the young man's soul that, for all his sometimes very youthful touchiness, he was at least ashamed of his rags in the streets. It was a different matter when he met some acquaintances or former friends, whom he generally disliked meeting, and yet when a drunk man who was just then being taken through the street in an enormous cart harnessed to an enormous cart horse, no one knew why or where suddenly shouted to him as he passed by, "Hey you, German hater!" Pointing at him and yelling at the top of his lungs. The man suddenly stopped and convulsively clutched his hat. It was a tall Zimmermann hat, but all worn out, quite faded. All holes and stains brimless, and dented so that it stuck out at an ugly angle. Yet it was not shame, but quite a different feeling, even more like fear, that seized him. "I just knew it," he muttered in confusion. It's just as I thought. That's the worst of all. Some stupid thing like that, some trivial detail can ruin the whole scheme. Yes, the hat is too conspicuous. Ludicrous and therefore conspicuous. My rags certainly call for a cap, even if it's some old pancake. Not this monster. Nobody wears this kind. It can be noticed a mile away and remembered. Above all, it will be remembered later. So there's evidence for you. Here one must be as inconspicuous as possible. Details above all. It's these details that ruin everything always.